Islam's teachings and how they solve past and current problems. Part 5. Islam, guiding rituals, noble character, wise interactions and sound laws. Islam brought with it guiding rituals by which the human soul becomes cleansed and purified from all of the negative and lowly characteristics that corrupt it, such as classism, pride, racism, etc. Such guiding rituals lead the soul to lofty characteristics such as humility, empathy for others, cooperation, etc. An example of this is in the following worship rituals. The ritual of prayer. In prayer we witness equality between all Muslims. The leader stands beside the constituent, the rich beside the poor, the strong beside the weak, shoulder to shoulder and foot to foot, in organized, aligned lines. The prayer leader is the one who has memorized the largest portion of the Quran and, out of respect for knowledge, is also the most knowledgeable amongst them. They all perform the prayer in one manner, standing, bowing and prostration to Allah, exalted. A huge scientific benefit has been discovered concerning the act of prostration in the Muslim prayer ritual, placing the forehead and nose on the ground in exaltation of Allah, exalted. In that worshipping Allah, exalted, in this manner rids a person's body of extra electrons by transferring them to the ground, thus protecting the body from the harms they could cause. Thus, the wisdom of God the Creator, lofty, and exalted, becomes clear in the beauty and magnificence of His legislations. The ritual of the poor due. In this ritual we witness an example of social welfare in the Islamic society, where the rich, those whom Allah, exalted, has blessed with abundant wealth, extract a percentage of their wealth, 2.596, every year to give to the poor, needy and weak. Thus the spirit of affection and love reigns throughout the Islamic society, encompassing whomever dwells therein, Muslim or not. To be more clear, the poor due is calculated on frozen and idle capital, neither savings nor investments, over which one complete Hijri year has passed, with the intent to stimulate and invest it, such that the poor due is paid from the surplus and profits instead of paying it from the capital, thus producing fast returns on the capital, which indirectly encourages wealthy individuals to invest their money in different projects that generate work opportunities, thus lowering unemployment rates, producing fast returns on capital, and stimulating the economy. The ritual of fasting. In this ritual, Muslims withhold from eating, drinking and intercourse from dawn until sunset. For one particular month of the year, Ramadan, Muslims in every corner of the earth participate in this ritual all at the same time, in the month of Ramadan, and from dawn until sunset, and all in the same manner. It is recommended that a person breaks his fast with a few dates and some water, as this is from the guidance and habits of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. In this guiding ritual a person is able to imagine the plight of his brothers in humanity who are starving and sympathize with them, causing him to help them and show kindness to them. He also realizes the huge blessing of Allah, exalted, upon him and increases in gratitude for it. This is in addition to the scientific health benefits of fasting that have been discovered, which state that fasting allows the digestive system to rest, helps to rid the body of toxins through the liver, decreases the storage of fat by ridding the body of it, strengthens the immune system, overcomes addictions, and so many other benefits. Especially if the fast is broken with a few dates and some water after a long period of going without food. This is because the body benefits greatly by the vitamins and minerals found in dates and absorbs them easily. Likewise, water works to wash the kidneys inside the human body. The ritual of Hajj, pilgrimage. This ritual is obligatory for the person who is capable both physically and financially, at least once in their lifetime, and if the person wishes to perform Hajj more than once voluntarily, then that is recommended, during particular days of a particular month of the Hijri year, Dhul Hijjah, and at a particular place, which is Mecca. This is where all the different races of Muslims from all corners of the earth gather, regardless of their different colors, nationalities, languages, ages and classes, to perform the rites and rituals of Hajj in the one manner that Allah, exalted, wants, thereby strengthening the bond between the different races of people from every corner of the earth, and thus unifying nations and peoples. Something that has been discovered and noticed recently is that the Muslim ritual of circumambulation of the sacred house, the Kaaba, in Mecca that is performed 7 times in a counterclockwise direction is the only ritual that is congruent and harmonious with the universal order that Allah, exalted, created. For example, the rotation of electrons around the nucleus, which consists of atoms which in turn make up substances, is made up of 7 levels of energy, K, L, M, N, O, P, O, and is counterclockwise. Likewise, the Earth's rotation on its axis is counterclockwise, as is the Earth's revolution around the Sun. And this is the same counterclockwise direction of the ritual of circumambulation that Muslims perform around the Kaaba. Islam calls for beautiful, honorable and lofty morals, as well as good and wise ways of interacting, such as honesty, trustworthiness, compassion, fairness, generosity, open-handedness, forgiveness, pardoning, tolerance, and so much more. An example of that is in the following. The Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings upon him, said, "The best of you are those of you with the best character," Sahih al-Bukhari. The Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings upon him, said, "The most beloved to me and closest to me on the day of resurrection are those of you with the best character," Sahih at-Tirmidhi. Indeed, Islam brought upright laws through which the individual's and society's behaviors are corrected, thus leading to progress and advancement for the human race in every aspect of life. An example of this, Islam makes everything that is good and beneficial for mankind lawful for him, from food, drink, clothing, residence, marriage and much more. It forbids any foods that cause mankind harm, such as swine and dead meat. The dangers of both have been discovered recently to cause diseases in the human body, as well as drinks that cause harm, such as wine, spirits and alcohol, which cause a person to lose his mind and behave in an irrational and animalistic manner, which may lead to abuses and aggressions. In addition to the many dangerous diseases drinking causes in the human body, Islam makes all impure, lewd and sinful acts unlawful, such as murder, adultery, stealing, tyranny, etc., as well as anything that leads to the corruption of the individual and society. And there are so many more examples other than what we have shed light upon that clarify the wisdom and soundness of the legislations that Islam brought. Islam and its perspective on the trials, tribulations and the natural disasters that mankind encounter, and how to deal with them. Islam makes it clear that the different trials and tribulations a person encounters in life are one of the following. 1. They are to be considered a reminder and an exhortation for him. In order to realize his actual weakness, no matter what level he has reached in the different areas of his life, and utter need for his God and Creator to protect him and remove these trials from him, such as illnesses, diseases, straitened circumstances, accidents, etc. 2. Also, so that a person knows the reality of the fleeting worldly life, and that whatever enjoyment he experiences is only a passing enjoyment that is about to slip away and is not eternal for anyone. Indeed, it ends with a person's death, or a change in his circumstances or condition, such as from health to illness and incapacity, or from strength to weakness, or from richness to poverty, etc. Therefore a sound and intelligent person will not be deceived by this fleeting worldly life and its enjoyments, and will always be connected to his God and Creator, believing in and worshipping him and fulfilling his commands, thus working for the hereafter, which is the everlasting life wherein a person will find the reward for his deeds in this worldly life. The different trials and tribulations are simply a part of the test that a person is going through in life, meaning, will a person return to his God and Creator, believe in him and be satisfied with his preordainment, patient with the trials and tribulations that he decreed, glorified and exalted, anticipating the reward for his satisfaction and patience with his Lord, lofty and exalted? Or will he be the opposite of that, and deny his Lord, associate partners with him, show discontent with his preordainment and impatience with the trials and tribulations that he, lofty and exalted, decreed? Allah, exalted, says, "And certainly, we shall test you with something of fear, hunger, loss of wealth, lives and fruits, but give glad tidings to the patient ones." Surah Al-Baqarah, 155. A person must know that no matter how healthy, strong, rich or powerful he is, he will not live forever in this world, and there will come a day wherein he will die. He will begin a new stage of life in the hereafter wherein a person will be resurrected in order to see the results of his beliefs and actions. A person must also know that the worldly life will come to an end one day in order to make way for the other everlasting life that has no end. Therein Allah, exalted, will bring a person to account, and his recompense will be either the eternal delights of paradise, or the painful torment of hellfire. Therefore, the worldly life is nothing but a stage through which a person is moving on to the hereafter. How a person must deal with the trials and tribulations that befall him. Firstly, a person must believe in his God and Creator, glorified and exalted, and in the oneness of his divinity. He must be fully convinced that he, glorified and exalted, is able to do all things, and able to remove all the different types of trials and tribulations that he as a human is incapable of removing. Furthermore, he must seek refuge in him, glorified and exalted, humble himself before him and invoke him to remove the trials and tribulations that have befallen him and rescue him from them. Secondly, a person must exert all the means available to him to ward off the trial and safeguard himself from it. We conclude this point with the glad tidings of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, for the believer who patiently perseveres through the trials and tribulations that befall him, anticipating the reward of his patience with Allah, glorified and exalted, as he explained that Allah, glorified and exalted, will reward him well on the day of resurrection with the eternal delights of paradise. The Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings upon him, said, "Strange is the affair of the believer. Indeed, all of his affairs are good, and this is not for anyone except the believer. If he experiences happiness he is grateful, and this is good for him, and if he experiences hardship he is patient, and that is good for him." Narrated by Muslim. The Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and educating his companions, may Allah be pleased with all of them, upon the teachings of Islam. Bright illustrations of the life of Prophet Muhammad and the effects of adherence to the teachings of Islam. The message of Islam was founded upon noble characteristics and sought to firmly root them in the souls. The Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, "I was sent but to perfect noble characteristics." Al-Muwatta of Al-Imam Malik, and Al-Albani authenticated it. What is meant is the best of characteristics and the loftiest of praiseworthy traits. Therefore, the more noble a Muslim's character, in addition to his abiding by and adherence to all other Islamic teachings, the closer he will be to Allah, exalted, and the higher his rank in paradise. The Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, patiently persevered in the face of a great deal of difficulties while conveying the message of Islam, until he helped his people to progress and advance past divisions, conflicts, fanaticism, haughtiness, and constant fighting, to a nation brought together upon the teachings of Islam. He, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, established the Islamic nation in a short period, only 23 years. During which he was able to build a society founded upon the principles of goodness, truth and virtue. He, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, was wise in his propagation, forbearing in his direction and guidance, using intelligent and logical dialogue in convincing and deterring disobedience and lowly, evil characteristics. Indeed, the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, gave his companions the best education and training upon the teachings of Islam, which called for goodness, virtue and charming and noble characteristics. Here are some concise illustrations of the life of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, and the effects of his education and training on his noble companions. May Allah be pleased with all of them. 1 Anas bin Malik reported, "I served the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, for 10 years. And he never said to me uff, nor did he ask me why did you do such and such, or why did you leave such and such. The Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, was the best of people in character," narrated by At-Tirmidhi. 2 There was a time when the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, used to wear an Najrani cloak, i.e., a garment he used to wrap himself in from Najran, a place between Al-Hijaz and Yemen, and the hem of this cloak was very thick. Once a Bedouin man came up to the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, and pulled his cloak so hard that the shoulder of the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, became bare. The Bedouin then said, harshly and impolitely, "O Muhammad, give some of Allah's wealth that you have." The noble Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, smiled at him with forbearance, forgiveness and compassion, then ordered that he be given some money. A concise explanation of a hadith narrated by Al-Imam Ahmad. So instead of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, attacking this Bedouin, or ordering his companions to punish him, he pardoned him and gave him the best treatment. The ignorance of the ignorant only caused him, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, to increase in forbearance, forgiveness and kind treatment. 3 A Bedouin once came to the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, requesting some charity from him. He, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, gave it to him, then asked him, "Have I treated you well?" The Bedouin replied, "No, not at all." His statement angered the Muslims, so they stood up to beat him up for acting impolitely with the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. He, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, motioned for them to not harm him, then he took the Bedouin to his home and gave him more and then said, "Have I treated you well?" He replied, "Yes, and may Allah reward you and your family with good." The Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, then said, "When you said what you said before, it caused anger in my companions. So if you like, say to them what you have just said to me in order to calm their anger." The Bedouin agreed, and the next day he came and the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, "This Bedouin said what he said, then we gave him more and he seems to be satisfied. Is that so?" The Bedouin answered, "Yes, and may Allah reward you and your family with good." Then the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The parable of me and these types of individuals is like that of the man whose camel was running away from him. The people were running after it and it only made the camel run faster. The owner called out to the people, 'Leave me to deal with my camel, for I am more familiar with it.' He then came towards it from in front of it and offered it a fistful of grass. He pulled it back until it kneeled down. Then he saddled it and climbed upon it," narrated by Al-Bazzar. This example is a clear example of the extreme gentleness, forbearance, forgiveness and kind-heartedness of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, as well as his wisdom in teaching the Bedouin and his noble companions how to deal with these types of situations. For Anas, may Allah be pleased with him, reported, "The Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, was the best of people, the most generous of people and the bravest of people. He said, one night the inhabitants of Medina became startled when they heard a noise." He continued, "They found the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, on the unsaddled horse of Abu Talha, with his sword wrapped around his neck, saying, 'Do not be frightened, do not be frightened,'" narrated by Al-Bukhari. Meaning, one night, the Muslims in Medina heard a sound that frightened and startled them, and they were aroused from their sleep, alarmed and terrified, thinking that the enemy was lying in wait preparing to attack them in the darkness of the night. When the Muslims went out walking in the direction of the sound to investigate the matter, they found the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, coming towards them on a horse from the direction of the sound after he had investigated the matter himself, assuring them and telling them to go back to their homes. This incident illustrates the extreme bravery, fearlessness and courage of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. As such that he did not wait until the Muslims informed him of the matter, rather he fearlessly went himself to investigate the matter and assure the Muslims. Abdullah bin Amir, may Allah be pleased with him, reported, "My mother called out to me saying, 'Come here, I will give you something.' Whereupon the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said to her, 'What do you wish to give to him?' She replied, 'He will give him a date.' He said to her, 'If you had not given him something it would have been recorded on your record as a lie," narrated by Ahmad. Meaning, the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, was teaching this mother and all of his followers that all lying, including lying to children, is not permissible. This is so that children do not learn the act of lying and get used to it, and more importantly to raise children up with the characteristic of honesty. Sahl bin Sa'd, may Allah be pleased with him, reported, "The Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, was brought something to drink and he drank from it. On his right was a young boy and on his left were old men. He, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, asked the boy, 'Will you permit me to give to them first?' The boy replied, 'No, by Allah. I will not give up my portion of blessings from you to anyone.' Sa'd said, so the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, handed it to him." Narrated by Al-Bukhari. Meaning, it was the habit of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, that he would pass to his right and then to his left. However, in this instance he found that there was only one boy on his right and old men on his left. So he wished to allow the old men to drink before the lad out of respect for them, their age and their number. At the same time, he, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, did not want to deprive the boy of his rightful turn to drink, since he was on the right of the Prophet. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, so he wished to resolve the situation by seeking the boy's permission, in order to respect his right and acknowledge him. The boy, however, wished to experience the joy of drinking from the same spot of the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, and he was not giving anyone his portion of that blessing. Thus, the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, granted the boy's request, acknowledging the truth and fairness that he taught his companions as well as all of his followers. And also to give the boy a sense of value and get him accustomed to bravery and giving his opinion politely. Indeed, he, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, was a wise teacher. The Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, went out on one of his expeditions, wars against his polytheist enemies who fought against Islam, in the middle of the day. While he was returning with his army, he, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, passed by a tree-filled valley, so the Muslims spread out to take shade under the trees. The Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, went under a tree and hung his sword on one of its branches, then fell asleep. While he was sleeping, a Bedouin came to him, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, grabbed his sword, took it out of its sheath and leveled it. When the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, woke up, the Bedouin said to him, "Are you afraid of me?" The Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, "No." The Bedouin then said, "Who can protect you from me?" The Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said 3 times, "Allah." Then the Bedouin's hand began to tremble and he became confused and dropped the sword. Thereafter the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, picked it up and said to him, "Who can protect you from me?" The Bedouin said, "Be better than me," meaning, if you were me you would have mistreated me, so be better than me and do not treat me as I treated you. The Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said to him, "Will you testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah?" The Bedouin replied, "No, however I promise you that I will not fight against you, nor will I support anyone who fights against you." So the Prophet pardoned him and let him go without punishing him. The Bedouin returned to his people saying, "I came to you from the best people," and from that day on he never supported or aided anyone against the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. A summarized explanation of a hadith reported by Jabir and narrated by Al-Imam Ahmad and others. This incident clearly illustrates the extreme conviction of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, as well as his trust and confidence in Allah, glorified and exalted, and the beautiful forbearance, forgiveness and pardoning he showed for the Bedouin who had come to kill him. While the Muslims were digging a trench, in order to safeguard them against the attacks of the polytheists when all the enemies of the Muslims had gathered together against them, a huge and extremely solid boulder fell in front of them, and not even their pickaxes could break it up. They complained about it to the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, so he took the pickaxe and said, "In the name of Allah," then struck the boulder with one blow, breaking a third of it into pieces. He, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Allah is the greatest," and then gave the Muslims the glad tidings of a victory from Allah, exalted, for them in the future, which was the conquest of the Levant. Then the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, struck the boulder a second time, breaking another third of it into pieces. He said, "Allah is the greatest," then gave the Muslims the glad tidings of a second victory from Allah for them in the future, which was the conquest of Persia. Then the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, struck the boulder a third time, breaking the last third into pieces, whereupon he said, "Allah is the greatest," and gave the Muslims the glad tidings of a third victory from Allah for them in the future, which was the conquest of Yemen. A summarized explanation of a hadith narrated by An-Nasai. And all of these prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, came true, as after only a short time Islam entered those countries that he spoke of, and their people entered Islam in large numbers. This incident illustrates the complete trust and confidence of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, for Allah, exalted, as he did not depend on his strength but instead sought refuge in his God and Creator by beginning with the statement, "In the name of Allah," and concluding with the statement, "Allah is the greatest." He did not attribute his success in breaking the boulder to himself, rather he attributed it to Allah, exalted, by saying, "Allah is the greatest," as Allah, exalted, is greater than everything, and it is by his grace and blessing that we succeed in anything. Thus, this was an excellent lesson for his noble companions and all his followers in how to trust in Allah and seek refuge in him. This incident also clarifies how the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, spread the spirit of hope and victory in the hearts of his companions at their time of weakness and worry, and fear of attack from their enemies. It also shows the veracity of what he, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, informed them of and the authenticity of his message from Allah, glorified and exalted. 9 Anas bin Malik reported, while we were in the masjid with the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, a Bedouin came and urinated in the masjid. The companions of the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, began to scold him, so the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Do not interrupt him, instead leave him." They left him alone until he finished urinating. Then the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, called him over and said to him, "Any kind of urine or filth is not suitable for these masjids. Rather they are only appropriate for the remembrance of Allah, prayer, and recitation of the Quran." He, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, then ordered someone to bring a bucket of water and pour it over it, in order to clean the place where the Bedouin had urinated. Narrated by al-Bukhari. This incident illustrates the wisdom of the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, in resolving these types of situations. He forbid his companions from using force and violence with the one who was urged, and instead displayed gentleness with the Bedouin while teaching him a very subtle lesson without scaring or frightening him. 10. A man came to the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, and said, "My wife gave birth to a black boy," i.e., he was hinting that he was denying his paternity. The Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, asked him, "Do you own any camels?" The man replied that he did. The Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, asked him, "Are any of them brown or grey?" The man replied, "Yes, there is." He, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, asked the man, "How is that?" The man replied, "Perhaps it is hereditary." The Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, then said, "And perhaps the boy's color is hereditary, i.e., perhaps the boy inherited one of the characteristics of his ancestors." Narrated by al-Bukhari. Here, the Prophet did not allow the man to deny paternity of the boy for a mere imagined speculation about something that possibly occurred. This incident illustrates how the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, treated this dangerous situation that could have resulted in the loss of an innocent child's heritage and the complete destruction and breakup of a Muslim home, through intelligent and logical dialogue that was both satisfactory for the questioner and consistent with modern genealogical findings concerning this natural occurrence. Not to mention that not even the slightest proof existed of his wife's betrayal. This incident also illustrates the Prophet's role and wisdom in preserving the family and its stability, which consequently leads to the stability of the society. And there are so many other bright examples from the life of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, that illustrate the magnificence and loftiness of Islam's teaching and their objectives. The bright example of the life of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, had an extremely positive effect on his noble companions, as well as an active role in educating and bringing up a rare generation that was established upon the foundations of goodness and virtue. Some examples. Abdurrahman bin Auf was one of the companions of the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, who, after entering Islam, had migrated from Mecca to Medina in order to escape the harm and torture inflicted upon them by the polytheists, the people of Mecca who fought against Islam, leaving behind everything that was precious and valuable to them, wealth, homes, and sacrificing all of it for the sake of steadfastness and adherence to the religion of Allah, exalted, Islam. Therefore, after his migration to Medina, the companion Abdurrahman bin Auf was poor just as the other Muslims who migrated were, as he no longer owned a home or had any wealth or even a wife. Sa'd bin Arabi, one of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, who lived in Medina, and who welcomed, aided and supported the Prophet and his companions who had migrated with him, felt that the least he could do was to tell Abdurrahman bin Auf, "Take half of my wealth for you." Sa'd also had 2 wives at this time, so he said to Abdurrahman, "Choose one of my 2 wives, the most beautiful one. Look at her, and if you are pleased I will divorce her and you may marry her when her waiting period is over." Meaning, Sa'd bin Arabi wished to give preference to his Muslim brother Abdurrahman bin Auf by giving him half of his wealth and marrying him to the most beautiful of his 2 wives. And this was his way of implementing the teachings of Islam that the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, had taught them and educated them upon. Allah, exalted, says, "And they give them emigrants preference over themselves, even though they were in need of that. And whosoever is saved from his own covetousness, such are they who will be the successful." Suratul Hashr, 9. He longed for the reward and recompense from Allah, blessed and exalted, for the assistance he offered his Muslim brother. However, the response of Abdurrahman bin Auf, who had been taught and educated the teachings of Islam by the Prophet Muhammad himself, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, such as the encouragement to work hard and earnestly, to have self-esteem and dignity and to not be needy towards others, was simply to invoke Allah to grant goodness to his brother, in Islam, Sa'd, saying to him, "May Allah bless your family and your wealth," and decided to work as a trader. The story in its entirety was narrated by Al-Imam al-Bukhari. Allah bestowed his blessings upon the companion Abdurrahman bin Auf, who refused to eat and live by other than the work and earnings of his own hands, and opened the doors of his graces and provisions for him until he became one of the wealthiest Muslims who would spend abundantly on the poor and needy. His was a true implementation of the teachings of Islam and emulation of the chosen Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. We conclude this point with a brief description of the personality and physical features of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, in the following manner. A brief description of his personality, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. He was always pensive and silent for long periods of time, never speaking unless there was a need, gentle-natured, never becoming angry for the sake of himself. His anger was only for the sake of Allah, exalted. When his sacredness was violated, his laugh was a smile. He joked and played with his companions and never said except the truth. A brief description of the physical features of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. He had a pinkish color, light-skinned with a reddish tint, a round face like a full moon. Due to their natural beauty, his eyes appeared as if they were adorned with liner although they were not, and they were wide set with a long gap between them. His eyelashes were long, which added to the beauty of his eyes. His eyebrows were subtly long and disconnected. He had a wide forehead, a thin nose and the most handsome mouth. He had a gap in his front teeth, and when he spoke it looked as if light emanated from between them. When he was happy his face lit up like a piece of the moon. His hair was black and neither curly nor straight. His neck was as pure as silver. His beard was completely black except for a few grey hairs from aging. He was firm-bodied, neither plump nor thin. He was neither tall nor short, although he was closer to tall. His chest and belly were even. He was open-minded. He never became angry for his own sake. Rather he became angry only for the sake of Allah, glorified and exalted. He was simply illuminating. If any part of his body became exposed such as his shoulders during Hajj or Umrah, it looked like light due to its beauty and purity. And these are just some of the physical characteristics of Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him.